You're listening to Eat, Play, Sex with Dr. Kat, the place to uplevel that sexy life of yours, with expert talk on sex, love, and nutrition.
About the importance of what you're eating and how you're digesting, but also there's a lot of research I've been listening to about how your gut health impacts your brain health, so your mental health. And one thing that I've noticed as I've come off of like all these things, including coffee and sugar, I had a lot of anxiety that came up and a lot of nervousness that came up, which isn't a usual part of my daily life. But I was like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind, and I wondered if that had anything to do with what I was doing, or like with the gut, or if maybe some of these mental health issues that people are struggling with is actually related to the gut health.
Yeah. And I think there's a period in my career where I thought the gut and the gut microbiome were like the sole cause of most things going on in the body. And now, as with what we always do, right, I'm in somewhat more of a balanced state where I think it plays a role. I think the microbiome is incredibly interesting and research keeps coming out about it. But I don't think it's the one thing. And so, let me talk about what is the gut microbiome first of all, so people understand, but it's a collection of the microorganisms in our gut. And so think of the gut as like this city, and we've got fungi, we've got bacteria, and we have protozoa. We have all of these different microorganisms that are normal inhabitants of our gut. We want them there. They're commensals a lot of the time, meaning that they give us things and we give them a place to live. And the interesting thing about this kind of city of microorganisms is like little factories in the city, they all produce different things. We all, they give us things, and they have, just like we have a bike shop and we have this and we have that. We get short chain fatty acids. We get things that actually change BDNF in the brain, which is brain derived neurotrophic factor, from these bacteria that actually help to make new neuronal connections so that we can learn, so that we can grow, we can learn new skills. But they also can affect inflammation in the brain. So our gut bacteria, depending on who's there, if we have something called lipopolysaccharides that are released that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier and increase inflammation in the brain, then we're more likely to have changes in mood. So that's why, people with IBD, it possibly is why one of the reasons is much higher rates of depression in people with ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, not just because of the actual disease process that affects quality of life, like how we move about the world, but also because there may be some neuroinflammation that's taking place. And we know that neuroinflammation and depression and mood changes can definitely be there. But I think it can be really empowering because we have control in part about our gut microbiome with what we eat, our lifestyle, how much stress we decide to put it under. So these are all things that we can modulate. And so ideally, we're really putting back the foundations of health, which it all comes back to. It's like exercise, eating vegetables, diversity of our food are really the things that impact our gut microbiome as well.
Yeah. And because I read a lot about probiotics and prebiotics too. How important is that, or how much of a weight does that play a role?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I also think we're at like the very beginning of the gut microbiome research. So I think we think we know a lot, whereas the researchers themselves will say we don't know a ton. And so we can sequence the microbiome. So we know who's there, but we don't know who's making what yet in terms of like what the factories are actually producing. For the most part, we know some of it, but we also don't know when they interact with each other, what's happening. And so probiotics come in, and we've had a lot of research on probiotics in rat models and animal models and what they do for, rat anxiety, for instance. There's a strain of bacteria called Lactobacillus rhamnosus. Forget the strain number, but there's a strain of that one. Nobody cares.
So impressive. Like, yeah. I'm so impressed.
But there was a study done on rats that this one decreased anxiety in a rat. Now I've tried these with people, probiotics for mood. I haven't gotten like crazy results yet. So I'm still like hesitant, I'm willing to experiment because there's, no negative side effects with a lot of these things, but haven't really figured out like if they're actually going to correlate clinically? Like, are people actually going to feel better on them or not? Or should we be really changing the diet to produce more of a certain metabolite, like a productive end product, like actually something that they produce that helps mood, So
Yeah.
we'll keep looking into it. And I think it could be really exciting. We're not quite there yet. So I think it's a worth a shot just experimenting, but make sure if you're going to choose a probiotic, you don't just go to Whole Foods, you choose a random one off the shelf and you take it for mood, because if the strains in that probiotic haven't been studied for anything to do with mood, and you're actually taking one that helps with diarrhea, but you're constipated, then you're not going to do any good. So it's easy to throw away money with probiotics, but I think that in the future we could have a lot more tailored approaches to them.
Wow. That is incredible, because it's, we are given these messages of take your probiotic, take your daily probiotic, but there's so many different ones that they say. And so I always wonder if, like, are we making this worse, or are we actually targeting? And so you're saying it's important to know what you are using this for to determine which one you're taking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We know
Okay.
that with other things, right? If you have vitamin D deficiency, you're not going to go take vitamin A. And so with probiotics, we don't know enough about them. And there's some
Yeah.
benefits to multi-strain products, meaning they have a bunch of strains in them and they could be just like generally beneficial.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan for everybody should take a probiotic. I just don't think it's the case. I think we should be able to get most of that through the diet. If we're like treating something, so I treat a lot of people with inflammatory bowel disease or IBS, then I want to be really targeted and say, okay, you have constipation. This one's been proven for constipation. We're going to use this first. Or you have ulcerative colitis, and E. coli Nissl 1917 helps with ulcerative colitis. We're going to give you that one. We're not going to give you, lactobacillus, whatever, because we just found it at the supermarket. So I think we need to be more targeted to save money and actually see if things are going to work.
Lovers, thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe and head over to eatplaysex.com to connect with me and grab my sexy guides. Because my goal here is to get you to eat, play, and sex better, so you can improve your sex life, which will improve every aspect of your life. Until next time, keep it sexy.